The vast chamber of the Galactic Concorde stretched wide and tall, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. The room hummed with the quiet murmur of over 200 alien species. They gathered here once every 100 years to discuss matters that affected all civilized space. Light from the 3 suns of the Traxxas system filtered through crystal windows, casting colorful patterns across the polished stone floor. Ambassador Zectheron of the Veldrid Empire stepped into the chamber, his 4 powerful arms held in the traditional posture of dominance. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, his armored exoskeleton gleamed under the lights. The 2 smaller Veldrid guards who followed him kept their eyes lowered in respect. The crowd parted as he moved forward. Some moved from fear, others from proper diplomatic protocol. The Veldrid had ruled the largest sector of known space for over 5,000 years. Their natural strength and tough outer shells made them nearly unbeatable in direct combat. Their diplomatic power came from this same physical might. Few species dared to challenge them. Zectheron enjoyed this respect. He had earned his position through dozens of trials of strength and intelligence. "Excellency," said his aide, Mokven, a smaller Veldrid with lighter armor plates. "All major delegations have arrived. The session will begin in 20 minutes. Zectheron nodded, the plates around his neck shifting with the movement. "Have the humans arrived yet?" "Yes, Excellency. They settled in about an hour ago. As usual, they took positions in the back rows." Zectheron turned his large head toward the rear of the chamber. There, sitting quietly in their area, was the human delegation. They wore simple blue and silver uniforms that looked plain compared to the elaborate outfits of other species. Their leader, Ambassador Frank Miller, sat reviewing information on a small screen. He was an older human male with gray hair and a calm face that showed little emotion. "Always at the back," Zectheron said. "Do they think they can hide from important matters by sitting far away?" Mokven shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps it is their custom, Excellency. They joined the Concord only 30 years ago. Many elder species believe new members should remain quiet and learn." 30 years is long enough to understand proper protocol," Zectheron said. "The central positions show power and influence. By choosing the back, they admit their weakness." A soft chime sounded through the chamber, signaling 10 minutes until the formal opening. Delegates moved toward their assigned areas. The Veldrid held prime position near the center, along with the Ancient Dravid Collective and the Saurex Federation. The newer members and less powerful groups sat in widening circles around them. As Zectheron settled into his place, he continued to watch the humans. Their behavior puzzled him. Unlike other new species who often tried too hard to be noticed, humans seemed content to observe from a distance. They rarely spoke during major debates, yet somehow had gained surprising influence in trade agreements and border disputes. "They are strange creatures," Zectheron said to Mokven. "No natural defenses, no impressive size or strength. Yet they advance their position without drawing attention." "Some say they are dangerous, Excellency," Mokven said quietly. "Not physically, but in how they think. The Dravid ambassador told me they have fought more wars among themselves than any known species." Zectheron made a dismissive gesture. "Internal. Conflict is a sign of weakness, not strength. Look at them. Their skin tears easily, their bones break under modest pressure. The weakest Veldrid child could defeat their strongest warrior." The final chime sounded. The supreme arbiter of the Concorde, a tall, willowy being from the energy-based Elam species, floated to the central platform. Her voice, translated through the chamber's systems, reached every delegate. "We welcome all to the 23rd Centennial Gathering of the Galactic Concorde. May our discussions bring prosperity to all worlds represented here." The formal opening speeches began. Each major power offered greetings and broad statements about cooperation and peace. When it was the Veldrid turn, Zectheron spoke of strength and protection, the values his people had always represented. "The Veldrid Empire stands as it has for 5 millennia, a foundation of stability in an uncertain galaxy. Our strength remains at the service of order and proper hierarchy." Several of the older species nodded in agreement. The humans showed no reaction at all. This annoyed Zectheron more than open disagreement would have. He finished his speech with a firm promise to maintain Veldred interests throughout the coming negotiations. As he returned to his seat, he noticed Ambassador Miller leaning over to speak quietly with a female human in a military uniform. She nodded once, her face serious. Something about their quiet exchange caught Zekatheron's attention. It reminded him of Veldred commanders planning battle strategy. The day continued with reports from various sectors of the galaxy. Resources, border adjustments, and trade routes formed the bulk of the discussion. The Veldred delegation spoke often, asserting their traditional claims to several disputed systems. Each time an important vote approached, Zekatheron found himself looking toward the human section. Frank Miller rarely spoke, but when he did, his words were carefully chosen. Other species listened carefully to the humans' brief comments. It was strange to see such attention paid to a physically unimpressive species. During the midday break, Zekatheron approached a Dravid diplomat he had known for many years. "Tell me, Counselor Thet, what do you make of the humans? They sit in the back yet seem to hold unusual influence." The old Dravid's skin rippled with color patterns that indicated amusement. "Do not let their placement fool you, my friend. On their world, they evolved as both predator and prey. They learned to watch from safe positions before making their moves." "That sounds like cowardice," Zekatheron said. "Perhaps. Or perhaps wisdom. In the 30 years since they joined us, they have resolved 3 major conflicts that seemed impossible to settle. They never demanded territory or special treatment. They simply solved problems in ways no one expected." Zekatheron considered this as he watched Ambassador Miller speaking with representatives from several smaller worlds. The human's manner was respectful but confident. He didn't try to dominate the conversation, yet seemed to guide it nonetheless. "I still find their behavior odd," Zekatheron admitted. "If you have something valuable to contribute, you should stand at the center and speak with authority." "Different species, different ways," that replied. "The humans have a saying, 'Still waters run deep.' I believe we have yet to see the true depths of their capabilities." As the break ended and delegates returned to their places, Zekatheron felt a new curiosity about the quiet species in the back rows. Something about them suggested hidden complexity. He would watch them more closely in the coming days. The afternoon session began with the most contentious topic yet: access rights to the newly discovered Proxima system and its rare mineral deposits. Zekatheron straightened his massive frame, ready to assert Veldred claims to these valuable resources. The real business of the summit was about to begin. The second day of the summit focused on the Proxima system. The large display in the center of the chamber showed the star system in detail, 7 planets rich with rare minerals that many worlds desperately needed. Zekatheron stood tall as he addressed the gathered delegates. "The Veldred Empire has historical claims to this region," he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "Our exploration vessels charted these worlds 300 years ago. By ancient right, we claim primary access to all mining operations." Several delegates immediately raised their signaling devices requesting to speak. The Saurex representative, a reptilian being with bright feathers along her crest, spoke first. "The Proxima system borders 3 different territories," she argued. "No single power should control such vital resources. We propose equal access for all conquered members." Loud agreement came from the smaller delegations. Zekatheron noticed that many looked toward the human section before voicing their support. This irritated him. Why would they seek silent approval from such a minor power? "The Veldred discovered these worlds," Zekatheron insisted. "We have invested resources in preliminary surveys. The right of first discovery has been respected in this chamber for thousands of years." The debate grew heated. The Dravid proposed a compromise: primary rights to the Veldred, but with guaranteed access quotas for other powers. The Saurex rejected this, demanding completely equal treatment. After 2 hours, voices were raised and translator devices struggled to keep up with the angry exchanges. Through it all, the human delegation remained silent. Zekatheron kept glancing at them, waiting for them to enter the argument. Ambassador Miller simply watched, occasionally making notes or whispering to his team. Their silence began to feel like judgment. Finally, after most major powers had spoken, a simple tone sounded from the human section. Ambassador Miller had pressed his signal button, requesting to speak. The Supreme Arbiter acknowledged him with a nod. Protocol required speakers to approach the central platform. Miller, however, remained in his seat at the back of the chamber. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried clearly. "The Conquered values both historical rights and the needs of all worlds," Miller said. "Perhaps we might consider a staged approach to the Proxima system." The chamber grew quiet as delegates turned to look at the human. "The Veldred claim of discovery is valid," Miller continued. "We propose they receive primary development rights to the 3 outer planets, which surveys show contain the highest concentration of nuclear materials, resources particularly suited to Veldred technology." Zika felt surprised. He had not expected the human to acknowledge Veldred rights so clearly. "The inner planets," Miller went on, "could be developed under a shared authority, with the Conquered overseeing fair distribution of mining rights. This respects historical claims while ensuring no world goes without needed resources." A murmur spread through the chamber. The proposal was simple but addressed the core concerns of all parties. Several delegations began signaling their approval. Zika felt anger rising within him. The human had spoken without approaching the platform, a subtle insult. Worse, he had offered a solution that Zakatharin's own advisors had not considered. And he had done it from his position in the back row, as if unworthy of standing at the center. "The human does not even honor us by approaching the speaking platform," Zika said loudly. "Is this how Earth shows respect to the ancient traditions of the Concord?" Miller's expression remained neutral. "I meant no disrespect, Ambassador. Sometimes the best perspective comes from a distance." The comment made several delegates nod in agreement, which only increased Zika irritation. He stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the central area. "Perhaps the human representative would prefer to settle this matter according to the ancient customs of my people, through trial by combat, unless your position in the back row indicates your preference to avoid confrontation." The chamber fell completely silent. Trial by combat was rarely invoked, but remained a legal diplomatic option under Conquered law. Most delegates looked shocked at the suggestion. The Supreme Arbiter floated slightly higher, preparing to intervene. Theron felt satisfied with the reaction. He had put the human in his place. No one expected the physically weak species to accept such a challenge. They would back down, apologize, and proper order would be restored. In the silence, Ambassador Miller slowly stood up. His face showed no fear, no anger, no excitement, just calm consideration. "If that is your formal challenge, Ambassador," Miller responded evenly, "humanity accepts." Another wave of shock passed through the chamber. The Supreme Arbiter moved to the center platform. "Ambassador Zika, you have invoked the right of trial by combat to settle a diplomatic matter. Is this your formal intention?" Zika had not expected acceptance. He had meant only to embarrass the humans, to remind everyone of their physical limitations. Now honor required him to proceed. "It is," he confirmed. "Ambassador Miller, you have accepted this challenge on behalf of humanity. The Concord recognizes your right to select a champion, as is traditional." Miller nodded. "We will name our representative before the trial. Then it is settled," the Arbiter announced. "According to ancient law, the trial will take place tomorrow at midday. The terms are as follows. If the Veldred champion prevails, their claim to the entire Proxima system will be recognized by the Conquered. If the human champion prevails, Ambassador Miller's proposal will be adopted in full." The chamber erupted in excited conversation. Most delegates began making predictions or placing discreet bets on the outcome. The odds heavily favored the Veldred. As the session adjourned for the day, Ziktheron approached his aide. "Which of our warriors accompanies the delegation?" he asked. "None, Excellency," Mokvan replied. "You are the strongest among us present." "Then I will represent our empire myself," Ziktheron decided. "It will be a quick victory." Across the chamber he watched as the human delegation gathered in a tight circle. The military woman who had sat beside Miller now stood at the center of their group. She was of average height for a human, with short brown hair and a steady gaze. Nothing about her appeared remarkable or threatening. Mach-Ven followed his gaze. "Excellency, our information indicates that is Lieutenant Grace Sullivan of their expeditionary force. She has no notable combat record that we know of. They send a common soldier against me." Zikatherin laughed. "This will be even easier than I expected." As the chamber emptied, Zikatherin noticed something strange. The other delegations gave the human group a wide berth as they departed. Some even nodded respectfully toward Lieutenant Sullivan. It was almost as if they knew something that Zikatherin did not. "Find out everything about this human female," he ordered Mach-Ven. "I want to know why they would choose such an unremarkable champion." As he left the chamber, Zikatherin felt a flicker of uncertainty. The humans had accepted too easily. They had been too prepared. For the first time, he wondered if their position at the back of the room might mean something very different than he had assumed. News of the challenge spread quickly through the station. By morning, the combat trial was the only topic anyone discussed. Many delegates changed their plans to stay and witness the rare event. No one had invoked trial by combat in over 200 years. The last time had also involved the Veldrid, who had easily defeated the challenger. Zakatherin spent the morning in his private chambers, preparing himself mentally and physically. He stretched his 4 powerful arms and tested the natural armor, plates that covered his body. Though he was older now, he had maintained his strength through rigorous training. He had won 17 combat trials in his long career, 8 of them to the death. This would simply be another victory to add to his record. Mach-Ven entered carrying a data pad. "Excellency, I have gathered information on Lieutenant Sullivan as requested." "Tell me," Zikatherin said as he continued his warm-up exercises. "There is surprisingly little in the public records," Mach-Ven admitted. "She has served in their expeditionary force for 12 years. No notable battles or heroic actions are listed. She appears to be an ordinary officer." Zakatherin stopped his movements. "That makes no sense. Why choose someone so average for such an important matter?" "Perhaps they had no better option available," Mach-Ven suggested. "Or perhaps they are hiding something," Zakatherin said. "Continue." Mach-Ven looked down at the pad. "One strange detail. Lieutenant Sullivan has accompanied Ambassador Miller to all 7 diplomatic summits he has attended. She is listed as security attachment but has no formal diplomatic rank. This was indeed unusual. Most security personnel rotated assignments regularly." "What else?" "I spoke with delegates who have interacted with humans more extensively," Mach-Ven said. "The Dravid mentioned that humans place great value on something they call understated competence. It seems they prefer to appear less capable than they actually are." Zikatherin considered this information. It matched his observations of the humans' tendency to remain in the background. Still, no matter how skilled, a human could not hope to match Veldrid's strength. "It changes nothing," he decided. "Prepare my ceremonial armor." At midday, the combat arena was filled to capacity. The circular space had been cleared of all furniture, leaving an open area about 30 meters across. Delegates from all worlds crowded the surrounding seats, eager to witness the confrontation. The Supreme Arbiter floated at the edge of the arena, ready to oversee the proceedings. Zikatherin entered from one side, wearing lightweight armor that enhanced his already impressive frame. 4 ceremonial blades hung at his sides, though he doubted he would need them. The crowd murmured as he took his position. From the opposite entrance came Lieutenant Sullivan. She wore a simple gray combat suit with minimal protective padding. She carried no visible weapons. Her expression was calm as she walked to her starting position and stood quietly, hands at her sides. "She brings no weapons," Zikatherin commented, to Mach-Ven, who stood at the edge of the arena. "Perhaps she doesn't know the rules allow them," Mach-Ven suggested. "Or perhaps she doesn't believe they would help her," Zakatherin replied, feeling a new flicker of unease. The Supreme Arbiter moved to the center. "This trial by combat will determine rights to the Proxima system. The rules are simple. The first, Competitor to surrender. Become incapacitated or leave the arena loses. Lethal force is permitted but not required. She turned to both competitors. Do you understand and accept these terms? I do, Zacatherin said loudly. Understood and accepted, Sullivan replied, her voice clear but not raised. Then let the trial begin. The arbiter moved back to the edge of the arena. Zacatherin did not hesitate. He charged forward with impressive speed for his size, intending to end the match quickly. He extended his upper right arm to grab the human, expecting her to attempt to dodge or perhaps flee to the arena's edge. Instead, Sullivan stepped toward him, moving inside his reach. Her right hand shot up to grip his extended wrist, her left pressed against his elbow joint. Using his own momentum, she redirected his charge, sending him stumbling forward while she stepped aside. Zacatherin caught himself quickly and turned. The human had made no attempt to strike him, only to avoid his grab. This was unusual. Most opponents tried to land blows early, especially against a larger opponent. You are quick, he acknowledged, but speed alone will not save you. Sullivan said nothing. She simply adjusted her stance, hands loose at her sides, weight balanced evenly. Zacatherin moved more carefully this time. He circled to his left, then suddenly lashed out with two arms, one high and one low. Sullivan blocked the high strike with her forearm. The impact made her wince slightly, while stepping back from the low grab. She countered with a quick strike to his side, finding a gap between his armor plates. The blow was precisely placed, but lacked the power to truly hurt him. Zacatherin laughed. Is that the best humans can do? I barely felt it. Still, Sullivan did not respond. Her eyes remained focused, studying his movements. Zacatherin realized she was analyzing him, looking for patterns and weaknesses. This was not the frightened reaction he had expected. He launched a series of powerful strikes using all forearms in coordination, a technique that had overwhelmed many opponents in the past. Sullivan avoided most blows, blocked others, and took a few hits that sent her staggering, but did not knock her down. She moved with an economy of motion that seemed to anticipate his attacks. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Zacatherin had expected the fight to end quickly, but the human continued to hold her ground. The audience watched in growing surprise. Several delegates who had laughed at the beginning now leaned forward with interest. Why do you not attack properly? Zacatherin demanded during a brief pause. Do you hope to tire me out? I can continue this for hours. Sullivan spoke for the first time since the fight began. I'm learning, she said simply. The answer disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. He attacked again, putting more force behind his blows. Sullivan took a hard hit to her shoulder that spun her around, but she rolled with the impact and came back to her feet. 20 minutes into the fight, Zacatherin felt the first hint of fatigue. Sullivan was bleeding from a cut on her forehead and her breathing had become heavier, but she maintained her disciplined stance. Enough of this, Zacatherin growled. He drew two of his blades, a gesture that caused gasps from the audience. Using weapons signaled an escalation that most had not expected so soon. Sullivan nodded slightly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. As Zacatherin charged with blades extended, she finally changed her approach. Instead of evading, she moved directly toward him. She ducked under his first swing, blocked his second arm at the wrist, and stepped inside his guard. What followed was so fast that many in the audience missed it. Sullivan struck 3 precise points on Zacatherin's body, places where his armored plates connected. Each blow used the side of her hand like a blade, striking with focused power rather than brute force. Pain shot through Zacatherin's right side. His upper right arm suddenly felt numb and unresponsive. He swung wildly with his other arms, but Sullivan had already moved away. What did you do? He demanded, trying to move his arm. It responded sluggishly, as if the nerve connections had been disrupted. Applied pressure to your neural junction, Sullivan explained calmly. It's temporary. For the first time, Zacatherin felt real concern. This human knew Veldred physiology, knowledge that was not commonly shared. And she had struck with precision that spoke of extensive training. The fight continued, but the pattern had changed. Zacatherin now fought with growing caution, aware that the human knew more than she should about his weaknesses. Sullivan, meanwhile, had begun to press her own attacks, not with overwhelming force but with carefully timed strikes to vulnerable points. As the battle approached the 30-minute mark, delegates watched in stunned silence. What had begun as an expected display of Veldred dominance had become a genuine contest, and in the eyes of many observers, the tide was beginning to turn. 45 minutes into the combat, the arena had fallen completely silent. No one had expected the trial to last this long. The Veldred were known for quick, overwhelming victories. Yet here was Zekatharin, the most decorated warrior diplomat of his generation, locked in extended battle with a human who showed no signs of giving up. Zekatharon's breathing had grown heavier. 2 of his 4 arms now moved with reduced speed and precision. The human had somehow targeted nerve clusters and joint connections that even many Veldred didn't know about. Sullivan had taken hits as well. Her lip was split and she favored her left leg slightly when moving, but her eyes remained clear and focused. "You fight, unusually," Zekatharin said during a brief pause as they circled each other. No human should know these weaknesses in Veldred physiology. Sullivan kept her eyes on him as she replied, "We study all species we encounter. Knowledge is often more valuable than strength." "Study?" Zekatharin laughed, though the sound held less confidence than before. "When? Humans have been part of the Concord for only 30 years. Sullivan didn't answer. Instead, she moved forward again, this time changing her pattern. She feinted toward his weakened right side, then switched directions when he moved to protect it. Her palm struck precisely at the junction where his lower left arm connected to his torso. Pain flared through Zekatharon's body. The arm went completely, numb, hanging useless at his side. Anger and fear rose within him, emotions he had not felt in combat for decades. With a roar, he charged forward, using his remaining good arms to swing powerful blows that would crush bone if they connected. Sullivan ducked under the first strike, blocked the second with both arms. The impact drove her backward, then spun to the side. As she moved past him, her hand shot out in a precise strike to his back, finding a narrow gap between armor plates. Zekatharin stumbled forward, one leg suddenly unresponsive. He caught himself before falling but turned to face her, with new understanding in his eyes. "You knew exactly where to strike," he said. "This is not luck or general knowledge." In the observation area, Ambassador Miller watched quietly. Beside him, Mokven could no longer contain his curiosity. "Your champion fights as if she has trained specifically against Veldred," the aide said. "How is this possible? Our combat techniques are not shared with outsiders." Miller considered the question before answering. "Lieutenant Sullivan has a unique ability to observe and learn. She's been watching Veldred movement patterns since we arrived." "No one learns that quickly," Mokven protested. "Humans do," Miller said simply. "It's how we survived on our world. We weren't the strongest or fastest species, but we learned faster than anything else." Back in the arena, Zekatharin had adjusted his approach. He now moved more cautiously, protecting his vulnerable areas. He had drawn his remaining 2 blades, holding one in each functioning arm. "You forced me to take this more seriously," he told Sullivan. "Few opponents have ever pushed me this far." Sullivan nodded respectfully. "I understand." She reached behind her back and drew a thin metal rod about 40 centimeters long. With a flick of her wrist, it extended to a full-length staff. The fight escalated. Zekatharin's blades sliced through the air with deadly precision. Sullivan's staff became a blur as she blocked, countered, and struck. Metal rang against metal, and occasionally against armor. The delegates watched in amazement as the 2 fighters moved across the arena in a dangerous dance. Sullivan took a cut to her upper arm when she was a fraction too slow to block. Blood soaked her sleeve, but she showed no reaction to the pain. Zekatharin received a hard blow to his knee that made his leg buckle momentarily. An hour into the fight, both combatants showed signs of fatigue. Zekatharin had never faced an opponent who could match him for endurance. His people were built for short, powerful conflicts, not extended battles. The human, despite her injuries, maintained her concentration and controlled breathing. Why do you not yield? Zikatheron demanded after a particularly intense exchange left them both breathing hard. You must know you cannot win through force, alone. Winning doesn't always require superior force, Sullivan replied. She held her staff in a defensive position, watching his movements carefully. Then what does it require? He asked, genuinely curious despite his growing frustration. Understanding, she said, seeing the complete picture. Before he could respond, she moved again, but differently this time. Instead of attacking or defending, she stepped to the side and began to circle him rapidly. Zikatheron turned to keep her in view, unsure of this new tactic. Sullivan increased her speed, moving in an unpredictable pattern around him. Zikatheron tried to track her, turning in place. The constant movement made his injured leg ache. Each time he shifted weight to his stronger side, Sullivan changed direction, forcing him to pivot awkwardly. Stop this foolishness, he growled. Face me directly. Why? Sullivan asked as she continued to move. Because that's how Veldred fight? I'm not Veldred. Zikatheron lunged toward her, but she was no longer there. His momentum carried him forward, and he struggled to catch his balance with his injured leg. As he turned, Sullivan was suddenly inside his guard again. Her staff struck the same nerve cluster she had hit earlier, but with greater force. Pain exploded through Zikatheron's entire right side. His remaining functional right arm went completely limp. The blade fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. He staggered backward, now with only one working arm and an increasingly unsteady leg. This is impossible, he gasped. Sullivan stood before him, staff held ready. Do you yield, Ambassador? Fury and disbelief warred within him. He still had one good arm. He could still fight. But something in the human's steady gaze told him she had more surprises waiting. She had systematically disabled his advantages, one by one, and she hadn't even shown signs of using her full capabilities. For the first time in his long career, Zikatheron faced a moment of truth. He could continue and risk complete defeat, perhaps even death, or he could acknowledge that he had underestimated his opponent entirely. In the silence of the arena, he made his decision. I yield, he said, his voice low but clear enough for the officials to hear. The Supreme Arbiter floated forward immediately. The trial is concluded. Victory goes to the human representative. According to the terms agreed upon, the proposal regarding the Proxima system will be implemented as Ambassador Miller suggested. A murmur of astonishment swept through the watching delegates. Many had wagered heavily on Zikatheron. Others simply couldn't believe what they had witnessed. A human defeating one of the mightiest warriors in the galaxy through precision and strategy rather than raw power. Sullivan lowered her staff and bowed slightly to Zikatheron. You fought with honor, Ambassador. He stared at her, still trying to understand what had happened. You could have disabled me completely several times. Why didn't you? That wasn't necessary to achieve our goal, she said simply. As medical, teams entered the arena to tend to both combatants. Zikatheron watched Sullivan rejoin her delegation. Ambassador Miller nodded once to her, a gesture of quiet acknowledgement rather than celebration. The humans did not cheer or make any display of triumph. They simply gathered their things and prepared to leave, still sitting in their place at the back of the chamber. The next day, the summit reconvened with a very different atmosphere. Delegates who had barely noticed the humans now watched them with new interest. The Veldred delegation sat in uncharacteristic silence as the terms for the Proxima system were formally approved. Zikatheron was present, his injured arm supported by medical devices that sped healing. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes rarely left the human section at the back of the chamber. After the session ended, Zikatheron approached his aide. Arrange a private meeting with Ambassador Miller, he said. There are matters we must discuss. Mokven looked surprised. Are you certain, Excellency? After yesterday's events, precisely because of yesterday's events, Zikatheron interrupted. I have questions that require answers. 2 hours later, Zikatheron entered a small conference room. Ambassador Miller was already there, sitting quietly at the table with a data pad. Lieutenant Sullivan stood nearby, her injuries treated but still visible. She wore her regular uniform rather than combat gear. Ambassador Miller, Lieutenant Sullivan, Zika acknowledged them both with a formal gesture of respect, something he rarely offered to non-Veldred. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Of course," Miller said, indicating a seat across from him. "Please join us." Zika sat down carefully, his healing injuries making movement uncomfortable. He studied both humans for a moment before speaking. "Your champion could have killed me yesterday," he stated directly. There were at least 3 moments when a lethal strike was possible. Why show restraint? Miller glanced at Sullivan, who answered for herself. "That wasn't the objective, Ambassador. We needed to resolve the Proxima situation, not create a deeper conflict. Most species would have taken the opportunity to eliminate a powerful opponent," Zika observed. "That would have been short-sighted," Miller said. "The Veldred Empire is a valuable part of the conquered. We seek cooperation, not dominance." Zika considered this. It matched the pattern he had observed in human behavior. They consistently chose solutions that created stability rather than advantage for themselves. "Your species confuses me," he admitted. "You remain physically weaker than most, yet you prevailed through strategy. You sit quietly in the back of our assemblies, yet you observe everything. You could have humiliated me but chose restraint." Miller nodded. "Those choices reflect our history and our values." "Explain," Zika requested, genuine curiosity in his voice. "On Earth, humans evolved as both predator and prey," Miller began. "We weren't the strongest or fastest species on our planet. Large predators could easily kill any individual human. But we developed different advantages." "Your intelligence," Zika suggested. "That was part of it," Sullivan said. "But equally important was our ability to cooperate, to learn patterns, and to plan for the long term." Miller leaned forward slightly. "Early human hunters didn't chase down prey through superior speed. They tracked it patiently, sometimes for days, until the animal exhausted itself. They studied everything: behavior patterns, weaknesses, habitats. This is why your champion knew exactly where to strike," Zika realized. "You were studying me from the beginning." "From before the beginning," Sullivan corrected gently. "We study all species we encounter, not for weakness to exploit, but for understanding." "And this explains your position in the back of the chamber?" Zika asked. Miller smiled slightly. "On our world, we learned long ago that the loudest voice isn't always the wisest, and the strongest arm doesn't always win the war. We sit at the back because that's where you can see the whole room, all the players, all the moves. You position yourselves as predators would," Zika said, remembering what his aide had told him about Earth species. "We position ourselves as survivors would," Miller corrected. "Humanity spent millennia as both predator and prey. We learned to watch, wait, and understand before acting. We don't need to dominate the center of the room to influence what happens within it." Zika was silent for a long moment. "In all my years of diplomatic service, I have never encountered a strategy like this. Most species seek visible power, central positions, loud voices, imposing presence. Different evolutionary paths lead to different approaches," Sullivan said. "The Veldred developed physical strength and natural armor as your advantages. We developed observation, adaptation, and cooperation as ours. Your victory was not luck," Zika acknowledged. "Nor was it simply skill. It was the result of a completely different way of thinking about conflict. And about cooperation," Miller added. "Remember that our proposal still honored Veldred claims to the most valuable planets in the Proxima system. We sought balance, not total victory." This, perhaps more than anything else, confused Zika. "You could have demanded more after the combat trial. Why didn't you?" "Because that would have created resentment and future conflict," Miller explained. "A solution that benefits everyone is more stable than one that benefits only us, even if it gives you less immediate advantage." "Especially then," Miller said. "Humans think in longer time frames. We prefer sustainable relationships over short-term gains." Zika stood carefully, his decision made. I have much to consider. The Veldred have always valued strength above all else. Perhaps there are other forms of strength we have not properly appreciated. Every species brings unique value to the conquered, Sullivan said. That's why cooperation serves us all better than competition. As they prepared to leave, Zikatherin had one final question. In future sessions, would you consider taking a more central position in the chamber? Your perspective would be valuable to more delegates. Miller smiled but shook his head. Thank you, but we prefer our current position. There's value in maintaining a broader view. Zikatherin nodded slowly. I believe I'm beginning to understand. When the next day's session began, delegates noticed two surprising changes. First, Ambassador Miller was invited to speak early in the proceedings about several key issues, an honor usually reserved for the oldest and most powerful members of the Conquered. Second, and even more shocking, the Veldred delegation had moved their seating position. They were no longer at the center of the chamber. Instead, they had shifted to a position that offered a better view of the entire assembly. Not quite at the back where the humans sat, but no longer demanding the central focus. As discussions began, Zikatherin found himself watching the room differently, observing patterns, connections, and subtle exchanges that he had previously ignored. He noticed how information flowed, how alliances formed and shifted, how the quietest voices sometimes offered the most insightful suggestions. For the first time in his long career, he understood why humans chose to sit in the back. It wasn't submission or weakness. It was strategy, the position of those who valued seeing everything before making their move. The position of those who knew that true power came not from being seen, but from truly seeing. When he caught Ambassador Miller's eye across the chamber, Zikatherin offered a small nod of recognition. The human nodded back, the gesture invisible to most in the room but meaningful to both of them. No words were needed. They understood each other now.